I sat outside that apartment building for 22 minutes before I saw him walk out. I hadn't planned to be there. I hadn't followed him, hadn't tracked his phone, hadn't done a single thing that could be described as suspicious behavior. I was there because of a GPS. A car GPS, the most boring technology on the planet. Let me tell you how I ended up in that parking lot. My name doesn't matter. I'm 31. I work in corporate communications for a healthcare company in Atlanta. My boyfriend, Miles, was 33, an architect. Smart in a way that was specific and structural. He thought in systems, in load-bearing things, in how pieces connect to hold something up. We'd been together 3 years, living together for 8 months in his apartment, which had slowly become our apartment in the way those things happen without you noticing. It was a good life. I want to say that clearly, not because I'm bitter and trying to soften it, but because it was actually true. We cooked together on Sundays. We had a standing argument about whether to get a dog that I was slowly winning. We knew each other's coffee orders and family complications and the exact topics to avoid when the other person was tired. I thought we were solid. I genuinely thought that. My car died on a Thursday morning. Alternator. My mechanic needed 2 days. Miles handed me his keys without hesitation, kissed me on the forehead, said, "Don't mess with my radio presets," and took an Uber to work. I drove his car to my office. I drove it to the grocery store that evening. Completely ordinary. I'd borrowed his car before. The next morning, I was running late for a dentist appointment across town. I hit the navigation button to pull up the address, and the screen loaded to the recent destinations menu. I recognized every location on the list: his office, the hardware store, my parents' house from when we visited last month. Except one. An address on Peachtree Industrial I'd never heard of. Apartment complex, I figured by the format of the street number. I stared at it for probably 4 seconds before I hit directions to the dentist and told myself it was nothing. A friend, a job site he had visited, any one of 100 explanations that cost nothing to believe. But on the drive home, I scrolled back through the list. That address appeared 11 times. 11 times in 60 days of saved history. I'm a communications professional. My entire job is to manage information carefully, to think before I speak, to ask what I actually know before I say anything. So I did not call Miles. I did not text him. I went home, opened my laptop, typed the address into Google Maps, and looked at the building on Street View. Mid-rise apartment complex. Nice, but not flashy. 2 miles from his office. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I drove there on Saturday afternoon. Miles had told me he was meeting a colleague for lunch, something about a project bid. I said, "Have fun." He left. I waited 20 minutes, got in his car, drove to the address on Peachtree Industrial, pulled into the visitor parking lot, and turned off the engine. I don't fully know what I expected. Maybe nothing. Maybe to sit there and feel foolish and drive home and never mention it. Maybe to find some architectural explanation, a client's building, a site visit, something that would make 11 trips make sense. I sat there for 22 minutes. And then the front door opened. Miles walked out in the gray jacket I had watched him put on that morning. He was not alone. Before I tell you what happened next, if you've made it this far, you already know this channel doesn't waste your time. Real stories, real moments. Subscribe if you haven't. It takes 2 seconds. And stay with me, because this ending is not what you think it is.
She was laughing at something he'd said. He had his hand at the small of her back. That specific, familiar gesture, the kind you don't perform for someone you barely know. I watched them walk to his car together. I watched him say something that made her cover her mouth laughing. I watched him get in alone and pull out of the lot. She stood there watching him leave, and she was still smiling when she went back inside. I sat in the visitor parking lot for another 4 minutes. Then I drove home, made dinner, and waited. He came home at 6:45 and said lunch had gone long and the project bid was looking really promising, and did I want to order Thai? I said, I know about the apartment on Peachtree Industrial. The way his face changed is something I will remember for the rest of my life. Not guilt exactly, something more complicated than guilt. Like a wall that had been holding something back for a long time suddenly just tired. He sat down at the kitchen table. He didn't reach for his phone, didn't make excuses, didn't do the thing I'd half expected where someone buys time by asking what you mean. He said, "How long have you known?" I said, "Since this afternoon." "How long has it been going on?" He said, 7 months. And then, this is the part I didn't expect. He kept talking, quietly, carefully, the way he explained structural things when he was trying to be honest about complexity. He said he hadn't meant for it to happen. He said he'd tried to end it twice and hadn't. He said the reason he hadn't was because somewhere in the last year he had started to understand that he and I were, and he chose the word slowly like he knew how much it would cost, comfortable. That he loved me in the way you love something safe, and that he had been too afraid of his own feelings to say any of that out loud, so instead he had said nothing and done something unforgivable. He said, "I should have talked to you, I know that. I just didn't know how to say I wasn't sure anymore." I sat across from him for a long moment, and then I said something that surprised us both. I said, "I knew something was wrong for months, and I didn't ask you either." That's the part I've been sitting with ever since. Not the betrayal, which is real and which I'm still working through, but the quiet year I spent sensing something and choosing not to follow the feeling to its honest end. We had both been performing a version of our relationship that neither of us had examined. He handled that dishonestly. I handled it by looking away. Neither of us came out of that conversation clean. Miles is gone. He moved out within the week. I stayed in the apartment because he offered, and because the dog I had slowly been winning the argument about, we'd finally agreed to get one in the spring, was now fully my idea and fully my future, and I was keeping the apartment it would live in. Cleo. She takes up most of the bed. She has opinions about everything. I'm okay. Not completely, not yet. But I'm asking myself the honest questions now, the ones I avoided for a year, the ones that feel harder than the betrayal, but matter more than it. It turns out those were the questions that were always worth asking. I just needed a GPS to point me in the right direction. The thing nobody tells you about being cheated on is that the grief isn't just about what they did. It's about the version of yourself that already sensed it and chose, quietly, to look away. That's the part you have to go back for. That's the part worth recovering. Because the person who stopped listening to themselves in that relationship, she deserves to be heard. Start there. Everything else follows.